Good day to you, Maka learners! Welcome back to another lesson. In Lesson 1, we learned what a scientific method is. We learned the steps involved as well as pose simple problems that it can solve. The question now is, can we actively apply it to both our daily lives and within our communities? In this lesson, we will learn how to apply the scientific method to other life situations and how to apply the scientific method in solving community problems. Let's start applying the scientific method to solve a problem everyone faces, being late for appointments. We can discuss how to use the scientific method to solve this problem, but let's make it easier for ourselves with a simple illustration. Let's use this simple format to apply the scientific method to this problem. Our problem for this example is being late for appointments. What would be our hypothesis? That's right. Our hypothesis is that we do not allot enough time for the things we need to do before leaving home. Now, let's go through the data we can gather. 1. It takes 30 minutes to take a bath. 2. It takes 15 minutes to dress up and prepare my things. 3. It takes another 15 minutes to eat breakfast. 4. It takes 5 minutes to brush your teeth. 5. Travel time will depend on where I am going. Now that we have our data, let's analyze. Based on our data, we can see that it will take 1 hour and 5 minutes to prepare for our appointment. Our travel time will vary, but we can allot at least 1 hour of travel time to get from where we live to where the appointment will be. After looking at the data, we can now conclude that we do indeed leave ourselves short when we allot time to leave the house. We can then recommend to allot more time to get to our appointments by waking up earlier than usual. That way, we can go through everything we need to do to prepare for our appointments and have enough time for travel. Let's now look at how we can apply the scientific method in our community. We cannot exactly walk around the neighborhood for ourselves, but let's have our friend Juan here to do that for us in this virtual world. We see Juan walking around his neighborhood to see what problems he can solve using the scientific method. He noticed some health and environment-related problems during his walk which he would like to address using the scientific method. He saw how sickly the children looked and how dirty the surroundings were. He also noticed exposed manholes and piles of garbage on the sidewalk. Noting all of these, he listed down all the problems he came across. Here's what he wrote down. 1. Improper garbage disposal. 2. Thin and sick-looking children. 3. Improperly covered manholes. After listing down these problems, Juan came up with the following hypothesis. Many people in my community are becoming sick. Now that he has a hypothesis, he decides to test it out and gather data by going from house to house as well as asking local officials. He comes up with a short list of illnesses that he saw based on a list of reports from his local health center. He now wants to gather more information for his research, but he lives in a rather large community. How can he gather data in the most efficient way? Juan can try one of 2 things. He can apply limiting by including households in a small area, say those within 500 meters of his house. He can also apply random sampling, which means randomly selecting which households to visit. Both methods will work, though random sampling is preferred, especially by local governments. Random sampling lets each household have an equal chance of being included in the survey. This also means any information you gather will better represent the community you live in. Juan chose random sampling to gather data for his short study. But how did he do random sampling? And how you could do the same in your community? Here are the steps. 1. Seek the help of your community officials. Ask for a list of all the community members. 2. Write the numbers 1 to 5 on separate sheets of paper. Fold these and place them in a jar. Pick out a number. In Juan's case, he drew the number 3. 3. Using the list you obtained, pick every third household until you complete your list of people to interview. For Juan, he decided to interview 30 of the 100 households in his community. He goes through the list, picking a name until he gets the 30 that he needs. After picking the names of the households, Juan then starts going around to do interviews so he can get enough data. He has his pen, a small notebook, and a plan. Go out and interview the 30 households in his list. He also took notes of how clean each house was and the surroundings they were in. He then classifies his data according to the following table. Now that he's done gathering and classifying the data, Juan proceeds to analyze what he has. Based on the diseases he listed, which ones do you think would relate to his hypothesis? Many people in my community are becoming sick. That's right. It's diarrhea, fever, intestinal worms, and infected wounds. Juan then decides to list down the cures for each of these ailments. Now that Juan's table is complete, he can now start drawing conclusions for his study. From what Juan has, he concluded that his observations did support his hypothesis. He now has a few recommendations to make to his local government officials. Here's what he came up with. First, clean surroundings, dispose of garbage properly. Second, seek help from community leaders to cover manholes. Third, make your own compost bin to lessen garbage. And that's it for our module on developing scientific thinking. Before we go, let's look back at what we have learned in this module. The scientific method is an approach to problem solving that follows a series of steps. The following are the steps in the scientific method. Identify the problem. Formulate a hypothesis. Gather data. Analyze the data. And formulate conclusions and recommendations. The scientific method can be used in solving not just personal problems, but community problems as well. This was definitely an interesting module, Maka learners. We are now better equipped to solve everyday problems using the scientific method. With enough practice, we won't need to use pens and papers to use the scientific method in our daily lives. We will also be better equipped to use the scientific method to solve bigger problems like those in our community. We don't have a quiz for this module, but I would like you to practice using the scientific method for more complicated problems you may encounter in your everyday life. See you on our next lesson, Maka learners!